The weight of unhappiness settled over her like a heavy blanket. Peter was a successful growth consultant, highly sought after by various companies for his expertise. His work took him all over the country, and he was well compensated for his efforts. He always had the latest designer suits, the newest watches, and he changed his cars every 6 months. Yet, despite the wealth, he refused to allow his family the same luxuries. Stella and the boys wore clothes that were handed down from family and friends. The shoes on their feet were often worn and tattered. When Peter finally brought something new into the house, it was always second-hand, something he had picked up from a flea market. As Peter continued to go on about soap wasting, Stella glanced down at her hands, roughed and chapped from years of scrubbing and cleaning. The ring on her finger had long since lost its shine, much like the joy in her marriage. She had tried to talk to Peter about it, tried to explain how much it hurts to see him living in luxury while she and the boys made do with so little. But every time she brought it up, he would dismiss her concerns, saying they didn't need new things, that they should be grateful for what they had. The next morning, Peter left for work early, without so much as a word to Stella. She stood in the doorway, watching him drive away in his gleaming new car. A deep sadness settled in her chest, one that had been growing for years. She wondered how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was okay. Later that day, as she prepared lunch for the boys, David came up to her, tugging on her apron. "Mommy, why does Daddy get angry when we have new things?" he asked, his eyes full of confusion. Stella knelt down beside him, soothing his hair back. Daddy just doesn't like waste, sweetheart. He works very hard and sometimes he gets worried that we're spending too much money," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But we don't have new things, Mommy," Daniel chimed in, joining his brother. "Why doesn't Daddy buy us new clothes, like he buys new clothes for himself?" Stella felt a lump in her throat, but she forced a smile. "Daddy loves you both very much," she said softly. He shows it in a different way." As she hugged her boys, Stella couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to break through to Peter, to make him see how much his stinginess was hurting their family. But deep down, she feared that as long as Peter refused to change, they would always be trapped in this circle of abundance for him and deprivation for them. The next morning, the sun filtered through the thin curtains of their bedroom, casting a pale light across the room. Stella woke up early, as usual, to prepare Peter's breakfast and make sure the boys were ready for school. She moved through her morning routine with a heavy heart, her mind still preoccupied with the events of the previous night. Peter sat at the dining table, reading the newspaper, his expression impassive. He sipped his coffee without acknowledging Stella's presence. As she set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, she lingered for a moment, hoping he might say something, anything that could ease the tension between them. But Peter remained silent, absorbed in his newspaper. Stella sighed inwardly and returned to the kitchen. As she packed lunch boxes for David and Daniel, she heard them whispering in the hallway. "Do you think Daddy is still angry?" Daniel asked in a hushed voice. "I don't know," David replied, "but we should be careful not to make too much noise." Stella's heart ached for her sons. They were too young to carry the burden of their father's anger, yet they were already learning to tiptoe around him, just as she had been doing for years. After breakfast, Peter left the house without a word. Stella watched from the window as he drove off in his shiny new car, the engine purring as it sped down the street. She waited until the car disappeared around the corner before turning away, feeling a pang of loneliness that had become all too familiar. Once the boys were off to school, Stella decided to visit her sister Gloria. She needed someone to talk to, someone who could offer a sympathetic ear. Gloria lives just a few blocks away, and Stella often found comfort in her company. When she arrived, Gloria greeted her with a warm hug. Stella, it's been a while. Come in. How are you doing? Stella forced a smile as she stepped inside. I'm okay, Gloria. Just, the usual. Gloria frowned, noticing the tiredness in her sister's eyes. The usual, huh? Come, let's sit and talk. They settled in Gloria's cozy living room, a space filled with colorful cushions and family photos. Gloria's home always felt so full of life, a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal atmosphere of Stella's home. Stella admired how Gloria's children were always smiling, their clothes neat and new, their home filled with warmth. Gloria's husband, Richard, was the kind of man who doted on his family, always making sure they had everything they needed. Stella sighed as she looked around, her heart heavy with the difference between their lives. What's wrong, Stella? Gloria asked gently, sensing her sister's mood. Stella hesitated for a moment before speaking. It's Peter, she began, her voice trembling slightly. It's been so difficult lately. I don't know how much more I can take. Gloria's expression softened with concern. What happened? Stella recounted the events of the previous nights, the argument over the soap, Peter's anger over the new cups, and his refusal to let them have anything new. As she spoke, the weight of her words seemed to press down on her, and by the time she finished, tears had welled up in her eyes. Gloria reached out and took her hand. Stella, this isn't right. You shouldn't have to live like this. Peter has more than enough to provide for you and the boys. Why is he being so stingy? I don't know, Stella whispered, wiping away her tears. I've tried to talk to him, Gloria. I've tried to make him understand, but he just doesn't listen. He thinks we should be grateful for what we have, even if it's nothing but hand-me-downs and second-hand goods. Gloria shook her head in disbelief. This isn't about gratitude, Stella. It's about respect. He needs to respect you and the boys enough to take care of you properly. Stella nodded, knowing her sister was right, but what could she do? She felt trapped, caught between her love for Peter and her growing resentment towards his selfishness. Have you thought about getting some counseling? Maybe talking to a professional, Gloria suggested. Stella looked down at her hands, considering the idea. I don't know if Peter would agree to that. He doesn't like talking about his feelings, and he certainly wouldn't want to go to counseling. Then go by yourself, Gloria urged. You need someone to talk to. Someone who can help you figure out what to do. You don't have to keep suffering in silence. Stella sighed, feeling the weight of her sister's words. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. I'll think about it. They spent the rest of the morning talking about lighter topics, but Stella couldn't shake the heaviness in her heart. When she finally left Gloria's house, she felt a little better, but the underlying sadness remained. As she walked home, Stella thought about her life with Peter. When they had first married, he had been kind and generous, showering her with love and gifts. But over the years, something had changed. He had become obsessed with his work, his image, and his possessions. And somewhere along the line, he had lost sight of what really mattered. Stella missed the man she had married, the man who had once made her feel cherished and valued. She wondered if that man was still there, buried beneath the layers of pride and selfishness, or had he disappeared forever, leaving only this cold, unfeeling shell in his place. When she arrived home, the house felt emptier than ever. The boys would be home soon, and she busied herself with preparing their snacks, trying to push her worries to the back of her mind. As the day wore on, Stella found herself thinking more and more about what Gloria had said. Maybe she did need to talk to someone to figure out how to make things better for herself and the boys. She couldn't continue living in this gilded cage, trapped by Peter's refusal to change. Hi bestie, if you're watching to this point, please subscribe. Turn on your post notifications to always be notified when I post a new video. And please don't skip my ads, they really help this channel. Share and Yeah, back to the story. That evening, when Peter returned from work, Stella mustered the courage to bring up the idea of cancelling. She waited until after dinner when the boys were in bed and they were alone in the living room. Peter, can we talk? She asked hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. Peter looked up from his phone, raising an eyebrow. What is it, Stella? I'm tired. I don't want to argue. I don't want to argue either, she said quickly, taking a deep breath. We need to talk about us, about our marriage. Peter frowned, settling his phone aside. What about our marriage? What's there to talk about? Stella hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I've been feeling unhappy, Peter. I feel like we're growing apart and I don't know how to fix it. I think we should consider counseling to help us work through our issues. Peter's expression hardened. Counseling? Stella, we don't need counseling. That's a waste of time and money. There's nothing wrong with our marriage. But there is, Peter. Stella insisted, her voice trembling. You don't see it, but there is. We barely talk anymore, and when we do, it's just arguments about money or the boys. I miss the way we used to be, and I want to get that back. Peter shook his head, dismissing her concerns. You're overreacting, Stella. We are fine. You just need to stop worrying so much and be grateful for what we have. Stella felt a surge of frustration. Grateful for what, Peter? For living in a house full of second-hand things? Why you buy yourself new clothes and cars? For having to explain to our sons why their father won't buy them anything new? This isn't about gratitude, it's about fairness. Peter's eyes flashed with anger. Fairness. Do you know how hard I work to provide for this family? You think it's easy? Going out there every day, dealing with clients, making sure we have enough to live on. I don't see you working, Stella. I don't see you contributing. Stella recoiled as if she had been slapped. His words stung, cutting deep into her already wounded heart. I contribute, Peter, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I take care of this house. I take care of our children. I've supported you in everything you do. You asked me to stop working and I did. But it's never enough for you, is it? Do you know how many women want what you have? He yelled. If you can't continue living the way we are, you can move out, he said. Stella felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't bother to wipe it away. She knew this conversation was over, just like so many others before it. Peter wasn't ready to change, and she didn't know if he would ever be. Okay, Peter, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Good night. She turned and walked to their bedroom, leaving Peter alone in the living room. As she lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, Stella realized that something had to change. She knew she couldn't go on like this forever, but she also didn't know how to change things. All she knew was that something had to give, and soon. The sun was just starting to set as Peter pulled into the driveway. He noticed the slight chill in the air as he stepped out of his car, his leather shoes tapping against the pavement. He paused at the door, the silence already unsettling. Normally, by this time, he would hear the faint sound of cartoons from the living room, or maybe Stella humming a tune as she prepared dinner. But tonight, there was nothing, just quiet. Stella? Peter called out as he entered the house. His voice echoed in the empty hallway, bouncing off the walls like a lonely whisper. He slipped off his shoes and loosened the style, heading towards the kitchen. He fully expected to be greeted by the familiar aroma of Stella's cooking, but instead, the kitchen was dark and cold, the countertops bare. Peter frowned, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. Stella, I called again, louder this time, his voice edged with irritation. Where's my food? There was no response. Peter walked past the kitchen and headed down the hallway towards the bedroom, his irritation growing with each step. Maybe she had taken a nap and lost track of time, he thought. It wouldn't be the first time. But as he passed the children's room, he stopped abruptly. The door was ajar and something felt off. He pushed it open and flickered on the lights. The room was empty, not just empty of children, but empty of toys, clothes, everything. A sudden rush of fear gripped Peter's heart. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered under his breath. Rushing to the bedroom, he yanked open the door, already knowing what he would find, or rather, what he wouldn't find. The room was stripped of Stella's presence. A side of the closet was empty, the hangers bare. The vanity that once been cluttered with her perfumes, lotion, and jewelry were now spotless, and as though she had never been there at all. Peter stood in the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest. "She's gone," he whispered, the words barely audible. His mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. She really left? For a moment, Peter was paralyzed by shock. He had said those cruel words to her, driven her away, but he hadn't actually expected her to leave. He had always believed she would stay, that she would endure, that she needed him, but now it was clear. She was gone. She had taken the children and left him alone in this empty house. Peter's thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of it all, and then, just as quickly as the fear had come, it was replaced by something else, relief. He let out a long breath, the tension draining from his shoulders. "Well, good riddance," he muttered, forcing a smile onto his face. "At least now, no one will waste my money." He turned on his heel and headed back to the kitchen, trying to shake off the lingering unease. "I'll grab something for dinner down the street," he said to himself, grabbing his keys and heading out the door. Man's got a hit. Months went by and the novelty of solitude wore off quickly. It started with small things. Peter came home from work one evening, expecting to find the house in the same neat condition that Stella had always kept it. Instead, he was greeted by a pile of dirty laundry on the bedroom floor. The kitchen sink was full of dishes, the bathroom mirror was smudged, and a faint odor lingered in the air. Something he couldn't quite place, but it was definitely unpleasant. He frowned, wondering how he hadn't noticed it before. Then it hit him. Stella had always been there, silently taking care of everything. Now, without her, the house seemed to be falling apart. "No problem," Peter muttered to himself, shrugging it off. "I'll just hire someone to come in and clean. Simple." The next day, Peter made a few calls and hired a cleaning service. The cleaners arrived promptly and went about their work, scrubbing, dusting, and tidying up the mess. When they left, the house looked pristine again, but something still felt off. Peter heated up a frozen dinner he had picked up on his way home, but after a few bites, he grimaced. The food was bland and unappetizing, nothing like the home-cooked meal Stella used to make. He tossed it in the trash and decided to treat himself to a meal at a restaurant instead. As the days turned into weeks, Peter's life began to unravel in ways he hadn't anticipated. The cleaning service was expensive, and no matter how often they came, the house was never quite the same. His clothes were clean but wrinkled. His meals were either burnt or tasteless, and the ones inviting home he had once taken for granted now felt cold and empty. In an effort to fill the void, Peter started spending more time with his lover, Ada. She was younger, vibrant, and always eager to please. They would go out to fancy restaurants, attend social events, and enjoy long weekends together. Peter enjoyed their attention and distraction. But as time went on, he began to notice things about her dad that made him uneasy. She was disorganized, often leaving her things strewn around the house. She didn't cook, she didn't know how, and when Peter suggested they hire a chef, she laughed it off, saying they could just eat out or order in. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a hotel, impersonal and unwelcoming. One night, after another dinner out, Peter and Ada returned home to find that the cleaning service had forgotten to take out the trash. The smell of rotten food filled the kitchen, and Ada wrinkled her nose in disgust. "Ugh, Peter, can't you do something about this?" she complained, waving her hand in front of her face. Peter bristled at her tone. "I'm paying them to take care of this. They will handle it tomorrow." "Tomorrow? We have to live with this stench tonight," Ada shot back. Her annoyance clear. Peter felt a pang of frustration. He missed the days when Stella would have quickly taken care of such things without making a fuss. The next morning, Peter awoke to the sound of Ada shouting from the kitchen. He rushed downstairs to find her standing over the stove, a frying pan in her hand, the smell of burnt eggs filling the room. "What happened?" Peter asked. His voice stinked with irritation. "I tried to make breakfast, but this stupid stove is too complicated," Ada snapped, dropping the pan into the sink with a loud clatter. Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not complicated, Ada. You just need to—" "I don't need to do anything," she interrupted, crossing her arms. "Why don't you just hire someone to cook? I'm not cut out for this domestic stuff." Peter stared at her, a sinking feeling in his stomach. He realized that Ada, while she was fun and exciting, she wasn't capable of managing a household the way Stella had. Stella had been the glue that had held everything together, and without her, Peter's life was slowly falling apart. That evening, Peter sat alone in the living room, the TV blaring in the background as he stared at the untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. Ada had gone out with friends, leaving him to his thoughts. He thought back to the day Stella had left. He had been so certain that he didn't need her, that he could manage just fine on his own, but now, with the house in disarray and his life spiraling out of control, he realized just how much she had relied on her. The following week, after Ada moved some of her things into Peter's home, he found himself even more frustrated. A carefree lifestyle didn't mesh with his needs. The house, once a place of order and calm, became chaotic. Ada threw parties on weekends, inviting friends who overstayed their welcome, leaving Peter to deal with the aftermath. Peter finally reached his breaking point when he came home to find that Ada had redecorated the living room without consulting him. Gone were the subtle, tasteful touches that Stella had carefully curated. In their place were mismatched items that clashed with the rest of the house. Peter felt like a stranger in his own home. One night, after yet another argument with Ada, Peter sat in his car, leaned his head against the steering wheel, his mind racing. He had pushed Stella away, driven her to leave, and now he was living with nothing but regrets. In a moment of desperation, Peter picked up his phone and dialed Stella's number. The line rang, and for a brief moment, he hoped she might pick up. But the call went to voicemail, and Peter didn't leave a message. He knew it was too late. Stella had moved on. A few days later, Peter heard from a mutual friend that Stella had started seeing someone new. The news shook him to his core. The idea of Stella being with another man, someone who treated her with kindness and respect she deserved, was almost too much to bear. Peter realized that he had lost her for good. The woman who had once loved him, who had stood by him through thick and thin, was now with someone who truly valued her. Alone in his house, Peter finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. He had let his pride, his stubbornness, and his refusal to change destroy his marriage and drive away the people who meant the most to him. Thanks for listening to this point, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed making it. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We have the best African folktales on this channel. And as always, I'll see you in my next video. Bye, besties.